All right. Happy Sabbath, everybody. Today is, let's see, May 23, 2026. And we haven't recorded for quite a while, but it's been a while. But the study we want to do today is about forbidden fat. We've actually done this before, but I kind of revised it because studying more about it, we add more slides, takeaway slides, and kind of make it more updated. All right. Okay. But the forbidden fat is basically something that we get from the Bible. All right. Because these are biblical foods. All right. We start in Genesis, basically. Everything starts in Genesis, right? When was our food designed by God? In the time of creation. On the third day. Right? Before man was created, on the third day he created what? He created the herbs of the field, which is leaves, right? And grains, and fruits, and nuts, right? And that was the third day. Even before he created animals and humans. And those were the foods, because the vegetables or the grain, the leaves were for, who ate the leaves? It was for animals, right? All the animals ate the leaves, right? Even the fish ate the leaves, which is algae, right? Yeah. But for humans, God designed fruits, grains, and nuts, right? So essentially you say this is the first statute that God gave for what he designed people to eat, all right? And all the fruits were good except one fruit. He always gives an exception. There's one fruit. Even though fruits are good, one is made as an exception. And he said, he commanded, if you eat of that fruit, you shall surely die. And Satan used that to beguile Eve. And he said, you shall not surely die. And Eve was deceived, right? And she fell into sin. Okay? And as soon as she fell into sin, God gave the solution to the death. Right? What was the solution to death? That I'm going to die for you, right? I'm going to die for you. So this is the food that is made in Eden. And then Eve sinned. And Adam sinned also. And he said, okay, because of that, right? He gave the gospel. And he said, because of that, I'm going to die for you. Because the wages of sin is death. And because of that, I'm going to die for you. And I'm going to die as a lamb. The Lamb of God, right? I'm going to die as the Lamb of God to pay for your sins, right? But then when you read Genesis 3 verse 16 on, but then he says, woman, you actually have sinned and now you have to suffer sorrow. What's the sorrow that the women have to suffer? Childbirth, right? And men, you also fell into sin. Adam, you fell into sin. You have to suffer also. You have to work. And you have to, the thorns and thistles, in the garden, you're gonna have to sweat. You're gonna have to work hard. But then he says, but now I'm gonna give you vegetables to eat. What does it mean? He says, now you have to suffer. And because you suffer, now God gives you vegetables to eat. Sorry, I've got to go back. What does it mean? Because when you suffer diseases. Oh, Dwayne is here too. Dwayne came all the way from West Palm Beach. Hi, Dwayne. Welcome back. Okay. All right. Okay. So, because you suffered, because of sin, you have to suffer. And because of that, you have to eat vegetables. What does it mean? Right from the Bible it says, because you suffer and you suffer diseases. Because of sin, you also have to suffer diseases. And the cure for that and the prevention of that is vegetables. Anyway, it's right from the book of Genesis. You get that, right? Yeah. Now we go into a little bit biology, right? Because from the fruits and the vegetables, you get glucose, right? That's the formula for glucose and oxygen. So you take glucose and oxygen to make energy, right? Right? That's the food to make energy. And the byproduct is water and carbon dioxide, right? But then came sin. And you know what? If that was perfect, all your glucose and all your oxygen will be turned into energy. But the problem is what happened with sin. Some of that oxygen becomes what is called reactive oxygen species, right? It becomes some of that the oxygen loses its electrons. It becomes unstable, right? Yeah, called free radicals. You heard of free radicals? It becomes unstable, right? Yeah. It's pro-oxidant. It's pro-oxidant, right? Okay, so this oxygen here is unstable. It says, I've lost electron. I need electrons to stabilize myself, right? So it looks around, and what does it see inside the cell? It sees lipids, proteins, DNA. So it says, okay, I'm going to get some electrons from the lipids, right? So now it takes the electrons from the lipids. Now the lipids become unstable. Now you get oxidized lipids, right? And then the proteins becomes unstable. And DNA now becomes unstable. So what happens? When DNA becomes unstable, what do you get? You get cancer. When the lipids becomes unstable, now you get cholesterol that can become plaques, right? So all these is because of the reactive oxygen species that causes oxidative stress, right? Oxidative stress. And it causes inflammation. All of that is inflammation. So heart disease, high blood pressure, cancers, the underlying cause is inflammation and oxidative stress, right? And eventually, necrosis, what? Death, right? Yeah, because of the wages of sin is eventually diseases and eventually death, okay? So if you have a pro-oxidative stress, what is it that you actually need? Pro-oxidant, you have to fight it against with antioxidants, right? So this antioxidants comes in, right? And it actually is like a extinguisher of all that oxidative stress in your body. And that antioxidants comes in what? The form of plants, which is the vegetables. That's why in Eden it says, you fall into sin, you got to eat vegetables, right? Because there's a lot of antioxidants to fight all that pro-oxidative stress in your body, right? So when you look at this, you know, cells that have a lot of oxidative stress eventually die, right? So dead cells have a lot of stress in them. So my question is, why are we eating dead cells? Because it just increases the amount of, oxidative stress in our body, all right? Okay. Now we go to another part. This story about the Israelites coming out of Egypt. And Egypt actually symbolizes the world. Because they're going to Canaan, which symbolizes heaven. That's our journey from earth to heaven, right? So they went and they got to a place called Mara, right? And in Mara, they ran out of water. And there, God said, okay, if you hearken to my statutes and commandments, right, I will not give you the diseases of Egypt, right? So in other words, you do not have to suffer the diseases of Egypt. And if you do suffer the disease of Egypt, I will heal you. And then what did God said to Moses? Throw a tree into the water and made the water sweet, right? So to prevent the diseases of Egypt and to treat the diseases of Egypt, the illustration is to use what? A tree. In other words, a whole plant. A tree is the whole plant. So you don't just use the leaves, you use the fruits, you use the roots, you use the whole plant. Everything. It can be used not only prevention, but also treatment of the diseases of Egypt. All right? All right. And what was the diseases of Egypt? Which is the disease of the world. They look at this Pharaoh here. Yeah, he died at the age of 80. The oldest Pharaoh died age of 90, right? In Egypt. Average died age 55. 55 years old, they're dead. And they look at they did a CT scan. They all had heart disease, cholesterol plaques, all of them, right? So high, right? What's the number one disease in the world right now that's killing the most people? Number one, heart disease, cholesterol and fat in your arteries, right? That's the diseases of the world, which symbolize the disease of Egypt, right? Number one disease in the world is heart disease. And the pharaohs died of heart disease, average 55 years old. How old was Jacob when he died? Oh, yeah, something like that. Yeah. Joseph was 147, right? Jacob was 147. Joseph was 117. Yeah. How old was Moses when he died? 120. And the pharaohs died at 55. Why? Yeah. It's the foods. All right. It's the food. It's the Egyptian foods. Okay. All right. So now we see. Are fats mentioned in the Bible? Well, it is. The first mention of fat in the Bible is actually what Abel had to give. He had to slaughter a lamb and he had to burn the fat, right? As an offering, right? And in the desert also, they were taught that they had to, when they sacrifice a lamb, they also have to take out the fat, and that fat has to be burned. Why? Because it is a sweet savor to the Lord. The Lord likes the smell. Oh, wait a minute. Do you like the smell of fat? Burning fat? What does... the thing about it is, what does this all mean? Because when you actually have to kill that lamb, right, and you have to sacrifice it, it's like the sacrifice of Christ. And the blood has to be spilled onto the altar. And that blood actually goes down to the earth. It contaminates the earth. Because the blood carries the life. It's the life of Jesus, right? The blood of that lamb. And then the fat symbolizes what? It symbolizes sin, right? And that has to be burned. So when God smells burning sin, that's a sweet savor to God. All right? All right. Yeah. So Ellen White says that, the fat alone has to be burned on the altar. Yeah? Because Christ, when he died, he had to take away the sin of the world. The sin, the fat has to be burned, So fat actually symbolizes sin. Okay. All right. Now let's go to fats now. Okay. Now, we go through part of the study. Oh, when I go back here. I got to go back here. There's a perpetual statute for the Israelites. They are never to eat what? Neither fat nor blood. And what kind of fat are they not allowed to eat? Animal fat, right? Because animal fat is never to be eaten, right? Because it symbolizes sin, and the blood symbolizes the blood of Jesus, right? So fat and so what is the forbidden fat then in the Bible? Animal fat, right? This is a perpetual statute, right? Animal fat. Okay, all right. All right. We're going pretty fast because we know all these verses in the Bible. You know, it's not anything new. So now we'll go to the part of the, right? This person has been eating too much of the standard American diet. Now he gets, yeah, he's in a sorry state, in a sad diet. Okay, and fat. Okay, so when you think about fat, you think about cholesterol, right? And this is what cholesterol looks like, right? And then you also think about triglycerides. Oops, sorry, too fast. Triglycerides. That's triglyceride. The blue part is the carbohydrate part. It's water soluble. But the fat is the yellow part, right? There's tri because there's three. There's three fatty acids. In the middle is called the saturated fat, right? It's saturated. It's straight. But when it's crooked, it's unsaturated, right? It's not saturated with all those hydrogens. That's why they're crooked, right? Okay, this means something because when it's fat, when the fat is straight like that, it's very compact and it becomes solid in room temperature, right? But when it's crooked, it is liquid, right? So unsaturated fat is kind of liquid, right? And saturated fat is solid in room temperature, right? So that's that. The fats is on the right-hand side. The whole thing is called triglycerides. You remember when you get your blood checked? Check the triglycerides and the fat. This is what they're checking, right? These are the fats that you actually eat, right? Okay. So what is it? Now we're all worried about our cholesterol level, right? What is it that actually increases your cholesterol level, right? Right. So if you eat cholesterol, right, it increases your cholesterol level like 5%. But if you eat trans fats and saturated fats, it increases another 10%. And if you're obese, it increases it another 5%. And if you don't eat enough soluble fiber, in other words, soluble fiber reduces it. If you don't eat enough soluble fiber, it increases another 5%, right? So if you do all of those things, you know, you don't eat enough soluble fiber, you're obese, you eat cholesterol and trans fat, saturated fat, your cholesterol can go up 25% by doing all these things. So the things that we have to worry about as far as diet is worry about our trans fats, our saturated fats, and our cholesterol. That's what we can do about what we eat, all right? Because that's what we can do for ourselves. Okay, how can we change our diet? What can we do in our diet to reduce saturated fats, trans fats, and cholesterol? All right? Okay. All right. All right. What can you do about these? Saturated fat, trans fat, and cholesterol. Now, you look at it. U.S. FDA. The FDA says, well, you really can't do too much about it because it's problematic. You can't change people's diets. This is terrible because you can't really change people's diet. The recommendation is you have to go the lowest you can. The lowest amount of cholesterol, the lowest amount of saturated fat, and the lowest amount of trans fats. You have to lower it as much as possible in your diet. But FDA says people's diets are kind of set, you know, so it's very difficult. You know what? Eliminating these three components entirely from your diet is not practical. What? So can we actually do anything about this? Now they actually found out trans fat is really bad. Trans fats, right? They actually banned it. In the United States, you cannot sell it. Right? You're not allowed to sell it. In Europe, Canada, you can't even sell it, right? Because they know for sure you're going to get heart disease if you have trans fats, a lot of trans fats in your diet, right? Okay. Now, when you go, where do you get trans fats? Go back to the Bible. And then obviously to Noah, God said, okay, here are the clean foods and clean animals, and here are the unclean animals, right? because it's a state of emergency, there's nothing to eat, you can eat of the clean animals. And in the Leviticus and Deuteronomy, it says, what are the kind of clean animals that you can eat? Right? The ones that chew their cud and their hoofs are cloven, right? Yeah, they're split. Yeah, split hoof, and they chew their cud. Okay, so those are the clean animals that you can eat. Now, what do these animals eat then? Grass, right? They eat grass. Okay, why is it considered clean? Well, maybe they don't have much diseases. But the thing about it is, when they chew their cud, what is it that they're doing? They continue to digest their grass, right? So what's in grass? This is the fat that is in grass, linoleic acid, all right? Linoleic acid is in grass, right? And in the bacteria, here's the bacteria in the gut. It ferments it, all right, to become vasinic acid. What's vasinic acid? When you look at that structure, that's a trans fat. So the grass, the fat in the grass, is turned into trans fat in a ruminant animal. A ruminant animal is the one that chews the cud, which is a cow, sheep, horse, camel, all those kind of things, right? Right. So animals that are ruminants will naturally have trans fats in them, all right? So what do you think about the products in that? So where do you get trans fats in animal products? In cows, in beef, right? Do you get in chicken? No, chicken are not ruminants, right? So beef, goats, right? And milk and cheese, right? Trans fat is natural in these animal products because they're ruminants, and it's called ruminant trans fats, right? Are trans fats good? No, we don't want trans fats, right? It's associated with heart disease, okay? And it's naturally.
The problem is that trans fat tastes better than the taste bud, you know, especially if you are a meat eater. Yeah.
You know,
it tastes different. You know?
Well, that's the reality.
Yeah.
do you know why?
Speak up.
You know why? Because it's fat. Fat tastes good.
So it's sweet.
And that's why when it's burned, it smells good to God. Right? You know, that's a problem. You know why? Because that is why it's very difficult to give it up. Right? Yeah, that's why it's very difficult. But the thing is that, when you read the Bible, it says, oh, that's all good. We believe what God said, and that's all good because we believe it in faith, right? But then now we have to study the science. And now when we look at the science, now we have to believe it intellectually, right? Now if we believe it intellectually and spiritually, now you are sealed, right? Because now you are sealed only if the truth settles into you intellectually and spiritually, right? So we have to know this intellectually, right? Okay. All right.
When you're sealed, actually, so nobody can force you now to eat that kind of fruit.
Yeah, there's no forcing in God's kingdom. There's no such thing as being forced. It's all your choice. Yeah, it's your choice.
But I mean, somebody said, "Oh, offer you a steak." He said, "No, I'm sealed."
Well, the thing about it is, you have to understand why you want to do it. Whether it's biblical principle or actually scientific principle, right? If you go just by taste, oh boy, this is going to be a problem, right? It's going to be a problem. Okay, so now we go into saturated fats. So saturated fat is like that. It's all straight, right? And because it's all straight, it's compact. And because of that, it's solid. right? It's solid in room temperature. But also you have it in milk, right? In all these animal products, there's high in saturated fat. But then you have unsaturated fatty acid, right? It's got a bend, because it's unsaturated, right? It's got a double bond. And when it has multiple double bonds, this is mono because it's only one bend, right? But, so it's liquid, right? Now look at saturated fat. 63% in butter. 63% of the fat in butter is saturated fat. In milk is 67%. All right? All right. Now this in pork is 40%. What about beef? 50%. Chicken, 30%. Wow. It's higher in the milk and in the butter. All right? See that? Because it's more processed. So you concentrate it even more. More saturated fat. All right. Yeah. Saturated fat in eggs is actually not that high. Cholesterol is high. All right. Okay. Now, what about palm oil? What do you think? Is higher or lower? Where do you think palm oil is? What about coconut oil? What about avocado? Okay, avocado is what? Look at palm oil, 50. Avocado is 15. What about coconut? 20. What do you think? You want to guess? Anybody want to guess? Where is coconut? Uncle Pete's seen this one already. Coconut has the most. Coconut oil does. Yeah. Coconut oil.
I guess it's like if it's like when it goes to 70 plus, it does.
Okay. Yeah.
So,
the highest amount of saturated fat in any kind of oils is actually coconut oil. Coconut has the most saturated fat. Now, as a matter of fact, the European Cardiology Council, Canadian Cardiology Council has said that you should avoid coconut fat.
The coconut oil, they try not to advise not to use it a lot that people concentrate on instead of searching about it.
Because fat. Yeah, fat also kind of, for your sphincter, it loosens your sphincter, right? So it makes it bigger, right? So fats actually do that. But anyway, coconut is now recommended not to be used by anybody who has any problems with cholesterol or fats because it has the highest amount of saturated fats, right? Okay. And then there's the polyunsaturated fat, right? And this is alpha-linolenic acid. Now, alpha-linolenic acid is changed by our bodies to make omega-3 fatty acids. Omega-3 fatty acid is very good. It's very important for our bodies. It's for our brain, for our heart. Omega-3 fatty acids comes from alpha-linolenic acid, right? And that's what the fish eats to make the omega-3 in their bodies. It's in algae, right? Now, the thing about it is that, the plant fats here is kind of liquid. It doesn't last very long, and it becomes rancid, right? So they said, but it's cheap. So they said, okay, let's do something to that, and let's turn it into trans fatty acids, right? And that's how they made. That's a trans fatty acid. Though actually they hydrogenate it, right? They change it chemically to make Crisco. Right? So this is cheap. It tastes good. It lasts for a long time. Have a long shelf life, right? And right, yeah. But the problem is a lot of people have found that it is highly correlated with heart disease, right? Trans fats, right? Trans fats, right?
That's the one. That's
So in the old days, it's called, right, Crisco recipes, right? Because they said, okay, you know what? Tallow is not good. Okay, we know tallow is not good, and let's make Crisco. But then he said, well, Crisco is not good either, right? But then now they said, okay, when you look at Crisco, look at the nutrition facts. How much trans fats? 0 grams. But then in the bottom it says partially hydrogenated vegetable oil. What is partially hydrogenated? It's trans fats. How could it be 0? Partially hydrogenated vegetable oil and hydrogenated oils is actually trans fats. But how could they get away and says trans fats is 0 grams? Because the FDA says if you have less than 0.5, in other words, if it's 0.49, you can round it down. If it's 0.51, you have to round up. But if it's 0.49 or down, you round down. So if it's 0.49, you can actually say it's 0. So it has partially hydrogenated vegetable oil, but legally they said it's actually 0. See, this is very tricky. So you look at that and go, wait a minute, this is crazy, because partially hydrogenated vegetable oil is trans fats. All right. Okay. All right. So you got to be educated. Make sure you don't get tricked. You got to, even when you read the label, you have to make sure you look for partially hydrogenated oil. Right? Hydrogenated oils. All right. Don't just look trans fats 0. Okay, that's good. All right. Okay. All right. All right. So this is the part where. Okay. So where do we get cholesterol from? Now, cholesterol is made in the body to make new cells, to make nerves, to make the brain, to make the skin pliable. Cholesterol makes everything pliable in the body, right? Yeah. That's why it's only in humans and in animals, right? Is there any cholesterol in plants? Plants do not have any brain, do not have any nerves. That's why they don't need cholesterol, right? So cholesterol is only found in animals, all right? So now we go, all right, let's see. Cholesterol, right? Now, let's say chicken. Chicken has 119 grams of cholesterol. Now, how much do you think beef will have? Higher or lower? Higher. Higher? No, compared to chicken. Compared to chicken, it will be higher, right? Yeah, 177. Okay, what about fish, like salmon? Lower or higher? Lower. How much lower? Actually pretty low. Now, this is cholesterol. Now, this is milk. What about butter? Actually, a little bit lower. Cholesterol. You're not saturated fat. We're not talking about saturated fat. This is cholesterol. Okay. Yeah, this is cholesterol in butter. Okay. All right. What about eggs? 180. Cholesterol there's more cholesterol in one egg than one serving of steak. So I said, I got a problem with cholesterol. What should you stop first? A steak or an egg? The egg first. If you have a problem with cholesterol, the number one thing you have to stop is eggs, right? And then what's number 2? Look at the numbers. What's number 2 you stop if you have cholesterol problem? Then meat, right? Right, meat. And then what's the third one? And chicken, all right? So there you go.
Salmon have bad cholesterol?
It has bad cholesterol too. Well, there's no such thing as bad cholesterol. Cholesterol is the same, right? All right. Cholesterol is the same, but it's lower, right? It's lower. But if you were to choose if you have a cholesterol problem, number one is stop your eggs, and then stop your beef, and then stop your chicken. All right. And if you're, eventually become really convicted, you can stop fish also, right?
If you look at the states, the one that tastes better and the taste buds of human beings are the most dangerous.
That's easy.
Yeah. So now let's see. Is there cholesterol in? What about the plant foods? Is there cholesterol in plant foods?
Yes.
No, there's no cholesterol in plant foods. Plants do not have brains or nerves. So it's what? It's 0, 0. Everything is 0. There's no cholesterol, right? There's no cholesterol in any plant foods, right? Cholesterol is only in animal foods. All right? Okay. What about saturated fat?
No, they have that.
Okay, this is saturated fat. We're going to go, quicker, all right? Just look at, okay, beef had 17, all right? That's, right? 12, okay, beef has saturated fat, all right? Of those animal products, beef has the most saturated fats, right? Now let's compare it to the plant foods, all right? This is one. This is olive oil. 7. All right, this is in 24 grams. Saturated fat in, all right. So if you have problem with your triglycerides being high, what should you stop first? Coconut. If your triglycerides are high, stop coconut. That's number one you got to stop. After that, then you stop your beef, right? And then your chicken, right?
The question is, does the old coconut or young coconut have the same amount of cholesterol?
Yeah, no, it doesn't have any cholesterol. Saturated fat. Actually, it has the same. It actually has the same. Now, the water does not have the saturated fat. The water is okay, but the meat and the oil has saturated fat. All right.
But what about the meat is fiber and
Yeah, it may actually reduce the amount that it's actually absorbed, but still the saturated fat, is the highest. Right? The milk still has.
That's a different.
No, the water. The milk still has the fat.
I read a study about that because the milk is very concentrated.
Yeah. This is for the Filipinos here. What about duck egg? Balut.
That's high because they have salt.
No, the salt does not have anything to do with the cholesterol.
It get worse.
Now here we're talking about cholesterol in the balut, duck egg.
That's high.
How high?
I told you it's high. The balut.
618. It is the egg had the most. The eggs have the most concentrated cholesterol because the eggs is not connected to a placenta. The egg comes out of the chicken or the duck as it is, right? All the cholesterol that is needed to make the brain and the nerves and the feathers and everything that is needed to make the chicken or the duck is already in that little egg. It's so concentrated. The yellow. No, it's in the yellow. The cholesterol. The cholesterol is in the yellow. It is. Right? Okay. All right. It's in the yellow. All right. Yeah. So what about the small,
the
quail egg? They're small. Oh, they have the same amount as the chicken. And this is for us Indonesians and Filipinos. Right? What about durian?
Oh, now that.
Durian.
Yeah.
Durian has a lot of fat. Does it have any cholesterol? No,
There's a lot of cholesterol.
there's no cholesterol. It's a fruit. Yeah. Does it have fat?
Saturated fat.
What about saturated fat?
No.
Actually, not a lot. Okay. So durian is safe. Actually, yeah. Most of the fat is unsaturated, but there's a lot of calories. That's the problem.
Yeah.
A lot of calories. All right. But it's unsaturated. All right.
You eat that, Frank? You don't have durian in your place either. You
Yeah.
guys, it's an acquired taste.
She would bring it home, maybe I would eat it.
Don't
Okay.
bring it home. It would
Bring it outside.
Oh.
No, I do not eat it.
What about?
What's the goal? What is the goal? The goal is to live as long as I possibly can.
No. The what is, you know what? We do not want to die the diseases of our parents, right? That's our goal. And the other thing is, religiously, we have to be the healthiest we can be, right? We have to be like Jesus because he's a perfect sacrifice. And we actually, in the Bible, Paul says we have to be a sacrifice, a perfect sacrifice for God, right? Our pattern is Jesus. He was a perfect sacrifice. And we have to glorify God in our bodies. And then when we glorify God in our body, because we are healthy and we are we have health with a healthy body also, right? So the goal is, it's not all just about, just the health, but we glorify God with our bodies, right?
And
Yeah.
if you're going to be saved in heaven, we are learning to eat what we have to eat in heaven. Because there's no slaughtering of cow in heaven to make our food.
Yeah, that's yeah.
So now we have to learn.
Yeah.
That's very valid point, but present to a body and living sacrifice unto God, holy and acceptable, without spot or wrinkle and such things, because our bodies are the sacrifice that we are presenting to God. So that is very important. It's not just one aspect, but we have to have a holy body, a spotless body to offer to God. We cannot go with any wrinkle or any such thing. And so when we truly understand this, that God is wanting to present our bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable God, we will not only think of just the human aspect of it, the healthy lifestyle, we are thinking about presenting our bodies to God as a living sacrifice.
Yeah. I think that's what not only healthy is obviously very good, but is even more important is how we present ourselves to God. Right? Okay, we keep going. Now, what about trans fats? Of all these foods, which one has the trans fats? Okay, this is a quiz for you. Which one has the trans fat? Remember, trans fats is because the ruminants eats grass and it turns to bacteria in the ruminants. So which one are the products of ruminants? Yeah. Milk, right? Butter and
cheese.
Yeah. No, eggs is not from a ruminant, right? Yeah. Right. But then the problem is that there's a lot of trans fats that is hidden in our foods, right? Because when you look at this cookie here, Betty Crocker cookie, well, looks good. You look at it, and it says trans fat 0.
Partially hydrogenated.
But then it has partially hydrogenated. So a lot of the processed foods that is packaged, in plastics and in boxes, they have to be preserved. And the fats that they have to use have to be also used. They use trans fats. All right.
Partially
So,
hydrogenated.
but the thing is, how many servings do you eat? Can you just eat one serving?
It's not like I eat fried brownies. What's the heat give that?
Now, the other thing is that it is,
Accumulated effect.
even if you use vegetable oil, if you heat the vegetable oil multiple times,
Yes.
eventually the vegetable oil gets turned into trans fats.
Mhm.
So eating like, fast foods where they keep frying the foods over and over in the same vegetable oil, eventually you get trans fats, right? Yeah. So, and then all these processed foods have a lot of trans fats when you look at it, So many foods, right? All these foods, have trans fats, right? Even the non-dairy creamer have a lot of trans fats, right? Popcorn, right? Chicken, especially battered fried chicken has a lot of trans fats. And processed meats like hot dogs, bologna, popcorn, and popcorn. All these foods, when you think about it, when you really look into it, have trans fats. Right? Okay. All right. So go into a little bit more here, more physiology. So how does cholesterol actually affect us? All right. I think this is important. All right, just to go through. All right. How does cholesterol get into where do we do not want our cholesterol building up in our coronary arteries, yes. Right? That's the biggest thing. We do not want cholesterol building up in coronaries, right? First thing first, cholesterol is actually made in the liver. Yeah. About 800 milligrams of cholesterol made in the liver without you doing anything. Every day it makes what you need. Why? Cholesterol is needed to make your hormones. Cholesterol makes new cells. It's needed. Cholesterol is needed by your body. It's very essential. If you don't have cholesterol, your brain doesn't function because it's a lot of fat in your brain. That's how the brain functions. Your nerves, everything, it needs cholesterol. And God designed that you actually make your own cholesterol about 800 milligrams a day, and that's enough, actually, right? Yeah. You don't have to eat more of it. Okay. So what happens to that cholesterol? The cholesterol is taken by LDL, right, to the body, right, to the body, right, to make hormones, to make new cells. But if you have too much of it, it goes into your arteries, right? Yeah, it goes, it's deposited in your arteries, okay? And cause, this is the bad problem, all right? So LDL brings it to your arteries. So when you think about it, is LDL the good kind of cholesterol or the bad kind of cholesterol? Bad, right? You want it low. Just think of it. LDL, you want it low. L is low. So you want it low, okay? Because it's kind of bad. It's bringing cholesterol to your arteries, all right? All right. And then, but cholesterol also can be taken from your body and recycled in the liver, right? With HDL. So HDL takes away, right? So you want it high. HDL high, that's kind of like the good cholesterol. That goes back to the liver, all right? Okay. Well, okay, that's all good, right? The thing is, we eat cholesterol. Right? We try not to eat cholesterol, but we do, if we eat cholesterol, what happens? It goes into our bodies, all right? And cholesterol is fat. It cannot be carried in the blood because fat does not mix with water, right? Our blood is plasma, it has water, so it has to be emulsified. And how is it emulsified? So that can be carried in the blood. Emulsified by what? Bile, right? You have to have bile. Bile actually makes it emulsified so you can absorb it into the water of your circulation, right? So it has to be emulsified with bile, right? So then it joins together, right? It joins together. Now it can go into the circulation, right? and it's carried by what is called chylomicrons. Now it can go into your blood. So the cholesterol can now be carried in your blood, right? Now it goes back, right? Now it goes back to your liver, right? And when you go to the liver, the cholesterol, they deposit in the liver, and the bile gets recycled. Bile gets recycled. So you see this? All right, let me put this right here. The bile goes down here, emulsifies, and comes back up. It deposits the cholesterol, and the bile gets recycled. Now, bile is made out of what? Bile is made out of cholesterol, right? So you need cholesterol to absorb cholesterol, right? To emulsify. Now you look at this, right? The bile, which is made by cholesterol, is just going in circles. It just goes in circles like this, right? It just goes in circles, right? So what happens? It goes here and it goes in circles. What happens if you just continue eating cholesterol? It just keeps building up in your plaque, right? Because the cholesterol does not go anywhere. It just keeps going in circles. In the bile, it gets used and it gets reabsorbed, right? So now it says, okay, the doctor says, your cholesterol is high. What's the medication we're going to give you? Statin. Okay, where does statin work? Okay, this is what we need to know, all right? This is intellectual study here. We got to figure out where the statin works, right? Okay, your cholesterol high, let's see. Let's block the production of, the production of your liver making LDL, making cholesterol, right? We block this with lovastatin, right? This is the HMGCoA inhibitor, okay? Those who are nurses and remember what that is, okay? It blocks the production of cholesterol in the liver, right? So if this production goes down, this goes lower, your total cholesterol goes lower, right? So lovastatin blocks this, right? Are there any other places we can? Well, there's other medications. Let's see where else can we block this? We can block it right here. Block the cholesterol from being absorbed. Block the bile from being absorbed. So you have bile blockers, bile medications that block the bile from going in, right? It's called Zetia. Zetia. It blocks the bile from going inside, right? And so if you block this, right? If you block this, and another medication is called cholestyramine, right? It actually binds with the bile, right? So if it binds with the bile and the bile gets blocked and doesn't get absorbed, what happens to the bile and the cholesterol that you eat? It goes out, right? Because it doesn't get absorbed. Not all of it, but a bunch of it goes out, right? So the bile is not being recirculated. It's going out. So the body says, wait a minute, I got to make more bile, right? Because you need it for digestion. So you got to make more bile. And where do you get that bile? Where do you get the cholesterol to make that bile? From your plaque. So if you take these medicines, your bile gets out, your cholesterol that you're trying to eat gets flushed out, and now the cholesterol that is built up here comes out. It doesn't get recirculated, right? That's all good, right? But the problem is that side effects. There's a lot of side effects with these medicines, right? And
the side effects come from stopping a natural function, right? Now your body will stop this natural function.
Right, there's the side effect is actually the worst side effect is actually the muscles, right? The muscles, right?
Your body says, okay, now you stop this function because you you stop dysfunction. Something else has to
Yeah. See, that's it. There's a whole bunch of, statins has so much side effects. One of the side effects is the muscle aches, right? It actually causes, and too much of that will actually cause renal failure because your muscle starts to break down, you get renal failure. The other thing is that it actually blocks your gut flora, right? That bile actually, the bile that you make now is changing your gut flora. And when you change the gut flora, you block GLP-1. GLP-1 is actually good for your diabetes. Taking statins increase your risk for diabetes 20%. It actually can cause you to become confused and have altered mental status, right? There's so much side effects, right? There's so much side effects, right? Okay. And all these medicines have side effects, all right? Okay, all right? Now let's see. What about saturated fat, all right? Now saturated fat eventually gets deposited not in your arteries, but saturated gets deposited where? Right here, right? Saturated fat gets, that's why the illustration is like that, right? This is saturated fat. Saturated fat, and remember this picture, right? This is the saturated fat, right? That's saturated fat, right? Before we go, we know this intrahepatic circulation cholesterol here. LDL also has to be recirculated, right? And it's taken up by the liver, right? So when the liver takes up LDL, the LDL in the blood goes down, right? Because liver takes it up. There's receptors to take up LDL. That's good. We want our LDL receptors to be working good so that the LDL will go down in the liver, right? Now, when you take saturated fat, it goes the same way. It's fat. It has to be emulsified with bile. It goes in, and it ends up right there in the liver, right? The problem is that when saturated fat ends up in the liver, it actually blocks the LDL from being taken up. So LDL remains high and stays high in the blood. So saturated fat increases your cholesterol, and that's how it does it, all right? By blocking the receptors here, right? So taking too much saturated fat increase your LDL, all right?
Saturated fat is fatty as liver disease.
That causes fatty liver disease, because now that saturated fat also goes into liver, and you take a CT scan, right? You can see the liver. Oh, look at that. The liver has a lot of fatty liver, right? It looks kind of whitish. Yes, that's a lot of saturated fat in there, all right? And now that saturated fat that is in the liver, right, combined with the glucose that you eat, right, this saturated fat plus the glucose gets turned into triglycerides, right? Now, triglycerides is saturated fats now. It's a saturated fats plus the glucose. The glucose is blue. Here, that's the watery part, and this is the fatty part. Triglycerides. And that's triglyceride is what is actually saved in your fat. So our adipose tissues hold triglycerides, which is saturated fats, right? That's why animals, when they eat grass, their fat is full of saturated fats also. Humans, we eat whatever we eat, glucose, whatever we eat, it gets turned into saturated fat, and that's how we use it as reserves for our bodies, all right? The problem is that it's too much of it. There's too much of it, all right? Okay, all right. Now, all right. Let me keep going here. So this is what happens in the artery. This is one of the biggest killer of humans on earth right now is heart disease and cholesterol plaque. So how does cholesterol plaque do? How does cholesterol get deposited? What carries it? Which type of cholesterol? LDL, right? Right. So LDL is made by the liver. It's normal, right? LDL is needed to make hormones and everything like that. It's needed, right? So LDL comes in, right? The problem is that when it brings up to the blood vessel. Let's for example, this is your coronary artery, right? Right? It gets oxidized there because of your high blood pressure, of your diabetes, and your too much insulin, and your oxidative stress, your high blood pressure, everything like the inflammation. Your arteries are inflamed, right? There's a lot of reactive oxygen species in there. Remember that reactive oxygen species oxidizes the lipids. It oxidizes your LDL in your arteries, right? So now it's, all this inflammation in your arteries causes your LDL to be oxidized. Okay? So when it's oxidized, it changes. Right? Now from blue it becomes red. That's just what my cartoon is like. All right. Now the body says, well, this is not normal LDL, right? This is a foreign LDL. This is oxidized. This is not normal. So what does the body do when it sees something that's foreign? It sends in immunity. Your immunity starts saying, wait a minute, we got to attack this because this LDL is oxidized. This is foreign. We have to attack it. And this macrophages, right, starts eating up the LDL, right? And now the macrophages gets filled with the cholesterol. But instead of actually recycling that cholesterol, it just keeps building up and builds up and builds up. And when you look under a microscope, it looks like a foam cell. It looks like foam. All that foam is actually cholesterol in there. And all of that builds up in your arteries because of the inflammation that caused the LDL to be oxidized, right? Okay. And that's what happens. So then the plaque gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And because of the sheer pressure of the blood going past through that plaque, the plaque becomes unstable when it's too big and it ruptures. When it ruptures, what happens? The body says, uh-oh, there's something abnormal here. We got to clot. We got to stop this and make a clot. When you make a clot, what happens? You get a bad stroke. That clot is what causes the massive heart attack or the massive stroke, right? Right, yeah. But it starts with the LDL that is oxidized because of inflammation inside your arteries, all right? Okay, all right? Okay, so what can we do about this? Now, in animals, we have cholesterol, and cholesterol is part of the human cell. That's what the human cell is, nice and pliable. Cholesterol is kind of fat. It makes our skin pliable, right? Nice and pliable, right? Right? That's what cholesterol is. It's very important, right? It's part of the cell. That's the part of the cell membrane. But in plants, there's an equivalent of that in the plant cell wall. It's called phyto. Phyto means plant. Instead of cholesterol, it's called phytosterol. Phytosterol is pretty amazing. It's so similar. It is almost the same except for this, 2 carbons, right? Except for these 2 carbons, it's very similar to cholesterol, right? All right. The good thing about this is when you eat this, it is not absorbed by your body. Your body, when you eat phytosterols, it's not absorbed, it gets flushed out. But now it binds to your bile because your bile says, oh, it looks like cholesterol. Now the bile binds with it. And when the bile binds with it, this is not absorbed. What happens to the bile? It gets flushed out. So when you eat phytosterols, it actually flushes out your bile. We want that because the bile is cholesterol. So phytosterols will actually flush out the cholesterol that's building up inside your body because the bile is now being flushed out. All right? That's all good. All right? This is the plant. It has phytosterols in the plant cell wall. All right? Okay. So how much do we need? how much phytosterols would you need? So they said, okay, let's do a study. And they said, let's find a bunch of Adventists. This is quite amazing. They find a bunch of Adventists. Because Adventists, there's Adventists who are vegetarians, there are Adventists who are not vegetarians, so there are a bunch of different kind of Adventists. And say, what's the amount that because they look at Adventists, they live in a blue zone in Loma Linda, and there's less heart disease there. So they said, let's see how much phytosterols do the Adventists eat compared to the general public. And Adventists eat more than the general public, yeah? The Adventists eat 343, right? As an average, a lot more than the general public, all right? The number here. 343 compared to the general public, like 89 grams a day, right? Adventists eat SDA, 343 compared to 78, right? So, okay, they eat more. Is that good enough? Is that enough to reduce your LDL, the cholesterol? All right, they'll look at it. Okay, let's see how much phytosterols do you need to lower your cholesterol. They look at this and they go, okay, 1 gram a day, 2 grams a day, 3 grams. Okay, the best amount is between 2 to 3 grams. Adventists only eat about 300 milligrams, so actually not enough, right? You need about 2 to 3 grams a day of phytosterols. Now, how many avocados do you have to eat to get 2 grams of phytosterols? You have to eat 17 avocados to get that much. How many bananas do you have to eat to get 2 grams of phytosterols? 130 bananas. Oh boy, that's not realistic. How do we get enough phytosterols to reduce the cholesterol in our bodies? All right. You can actually get supplements. You can get supplements, all right? But then you have to eat it. The best effect is to reduce the cholesterol the best, right? You can reduce it 9% compared to 7 versus 5. You eat it more than twice a day. Every time you eat some phytosterols. You eat 2 grams a day, and if you eat twice a day, 1 gram with each meal. So you get 2 grams of phytosterols a day. All right? Okay?
What's supplementation?
I'll give you. Dwayne here, his mind, I tell you, is faster than it's fast, man. No, it's fast. I tell you, it's fast. All right. So when you compare lovastatin and phytosterols, it reduces the first generation statins compared to phytosterols is the same, It reduces the same amount. 30% of your cholesterol can be reduced by taking enough phytosterols. The same amount as you are taking in statins, like lovastatin. All right? So how do you take it? Now, this is called the portfolio diet. It was founded in Canada, right, by Dr. Jensen. Right? He says, okay, let's have a portfolio diet. He says, okay, this portfolio diet, all right, he goes, you have to eat 45 grams of nuts, because the nuts actually have plant fats. They'll make your bile to produce more bile, right? When you eat natural plant fats in nuts, it makes your bile flow. That's good. We want our bile to flow, but then we want it to be blocked so that it doesn't get reabsorbed, right? And then you have to eat plant proteins, right? You need 50 grams of plant protein, and you have to eat a lot of fiber, because viscous fiber, will actually block bile to be reabsorbed, all right? And you have to eat plant sterols, phytosterols, 2 grams a day, right? And you can get it from Amazon, right? You can eat it like a Benecol, which is actually a margarine. I don't like that because I can't take this to work, but I can take this to work, right? You can get it in 900 milligrams or 1,200, right? So one of these with every with your food, right? But you make sure you eat it with some nuts also, right? Because it can actually reduce your cholesterol. Now the thing is, does it work for everybody? To some degree, but not everybody, right? Some people do not respond as good for this. Some people do. Right? I actually had people come up to me and say, "Wow, my cholesterol went down a lot." And some people, no, it didn't really go down that much. It worked for you? Oh, yeah. It actually, for some it does, and some it does not. It does it so much, But this is a good start, right? So plant sterols, right? What else can you do? Bergamot. Have you ever heard of bergamot?
Yeah.
Right? This is where we need to go to the land of Frank. It grows in Italy, right? It's a citrus fruit that grows in Italy, right? Right? It has naringin, neoerocitrin, neohesperidin, And what does it do? Wow. It actually lowers your anti-inflammatories, vasodilation, antioxidants. But what does it do right here? It works just like statins. It blocks HMGCoA reductase. It works like statins, right? Yeah. And then it goes, if you take 500 milligrams, it reduces 7.6%. That's 7.6%, right? But that's and then here it's 24%. It's kind of like all over. But these studies, some of them are open label studies, some are randomized control studies, so they're different. But in general, it does reduce your lipids. Okay, in general, it does reduce your lipids. And how much the dose? How much is the dose? Let me go back. Yeah. So let me go back. Oh shoot, where's my cursor here? All right, here you go. 1,500 milligrams, right? 1,500 milligrams. All right. Okay. So bergamot. Take bergamot. It reduces your LDL and cholesterol, right? Yeah. I think over there it does not have it as much. It works more for the LDL and the triglycerides, right? All right. So bergamot is another thing that you can take, right? And what other thing? Artichokes. Heard of artichokes? Oh, there's a lot of artichokes. Oh, go back. Yeah, bergamot. Yeah. Okay. We can go to Italy and get some seeds and plant it in the backyard, right? Yeah. What about artichoke? There's a lot of artichokes. Artichoke is good. It has a lot of antioxidants, right, which is good, but it also has inulin. Inulin is actually soluble fiber, right? Very important, right? This is amazing about artichoke. It reduces your weight. It reduces your waist circumference. It reduces your blood pressure, your cholesterol, your LDL, triglycerides. It reduces your hemoglobin A1C. This is amazing. Yeah. Artichokes. All right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But basically, it's the same.
Right, and you can take it. It reduces your total triglycerides, LDL, total cholesterol, right? And they used artichoke plant juice. Wow, I don't know. Can you get that here? I don't know. I haven't heard of it.
You go to what's that? Plant-based.
But this is what you can do here. You can this you can get at Amazon, right?
Yeah, you can get everything from Amazon.
500 milligrams of this, it reduces your cholesterol. Look at, 500, between 500 and 1,000. If you go more than 1,000, it doesn't really matter, right? So 500 seems to be a good number. 500, and it reduces it in 6 weeks. Cholesterol goes down, right? Artichokes. Okay. What else? Now when they look at the portfolio there, they said, well, it doesn't work with some people. And then when they actually found out, because a lot of people don't take enough fiber. Even though they take enough phytosterols, they don't take enough fiber, right? So they try to eat, viscous soluble fiber. Sometimes they don't take enough. So, right? This is soluble fiber. There's insoluble fiber, which is basically wood, right? Cardboard, wood, right? Yeah. If you eat carrots, it's all insoluble fiber. It's like sweeping your intestines, which is good, right? But what you also need is the soluble fiber, which is beta-glucan, and look at that, inulin, and xanthine gum, right? It looks like this under the electron microscope, but this is what it looks like because it becomes like a gel. It's viscous, right? It's viscous. And these, all these foods have soluble fiber, especially the ones on the bottom, like, flax, psyllium husk, oatmeal, okra. Okra is slimy, right? Yeah. And, yeah. All the plants that are kind of slimy, that's good. Yeah. Right. Yeah, soy also, And remember flax. Flax has a lot of this, right? It is good. You know why? Because this is your, this is your intestines, right? This is the border of your small bowel where cholesterol is absorbed. If you have this slimy stuff covering your small intestines, what happens? It's covered with slime, right? The cholesterol, which is fatty, has trouble getting absorbed, and it gets flushed out with all that fiber, right? That soluble fiber. So this soluble fiber will actually bind with your cholesterol and will bind with the bile acids also, and it all gets flushed out. This is why fiber is so important to reduce your cholesterol, because it binds with the bile and it binds with the cholesterol. Okay, so they say, let's do a study. When we do this, we really have to do studies. Okay, so they said, let's give people Metamucil, right? And not that they have constipation, but they want to reduce their cholesterol, and it does. It reduces their cholesterol 7% when they give Metamucil. The problem is Metamucil has a lot of additives. Yeah, a lot of, I can't remember the name of the additives, Yeah. Yeah, they have coloring. Yeah, and they have coloring and all kinds of stuff in the Metamucil, all right? Yeah. So what's better than Metamucil? You get psyllium, right? You get psyllium. You get psyllium husk, and you can get this. It actually, if you take psyllium husk, you'll get enough fiber, right? And then if you take it without changing your diet, you still can reduce your total cholesterol and LDL, but it doesn't affect your HDL and triglycerides. But if you take psyllium and you change your diet to a high carbohydrate, low fat, American Heart Association diet, step 1 diet, your HDL goes up, your triglycerides go down, LDL, total cholesterol goes down, So psyllium husk, you can't just take it by itself. You have to also change your diet as well, all right, to have the best effect, right? About 10.2 grams a day, all right, of psyllium husk, right? It reduces your cholesterol, 16 to 17 points, right? You can get this. I'm not selling stuff, but you can get this.
You're not sponsored.
I'm not sponsored. Nobody sponsored me. I don't. Right, psyllium husk, right? But make sure you have enough water, because this will. Yeah, it will actually absorb a lot of water. If you don't have a lot of water, it'll actually bind up and you could actually get constipated. So you have to have enough water, right? So that it can still get flushed out, all right? Because you want the what to get flushed out.
Psyllium husk is in Metamucil. Metamucil is for constipation.
Right.
Psyllium is for constipation, but it can constipate you too.
If you don't have enough water. Yeah, that, oh yeah, you're constipated. You have to eat with water. Right, it's the ingredient. It's actually the ingredient. Okay. We got more? Oh yeah. Berberine. Barberry. Alright? Barberry. It reduces your cholesterol, triglycerides, LDL. It improves your HDL. Wow. Okay. Yeah. And how does it do it? It's like nature's Ozempic. My goodness.
Yeah.
Wow. This is so good. You know? Yeah. It inhibits the enzyme HMGCoA reductase. It's like taking statins. But also, it enhances the expression of LDL receptors. It makes LDL get reabsorbed more. All right? Wow. Berberine. This is, right. It reduces your total cholesterol. Right? That's what, you know, that's, there you go. Yeah. 160, 8 points. LDL, 8 points? Triglycerides, it reduces triglycerides also, right? And what is the active ingredient in these berries here? What is the most significant? What's so different about barberry? Right? You look at the composition. Okay. All right. Brazilian nuts. It's in. Sorry, berberine. Now I go to some other thing. It's called. Right. Sorry. Let me go. Right. That's berberine. Right. Berberine does all of that, but I go to the next one. It's called Brazilian nuts. Brazilian nuts. Have you heard about Brazilian nuts? Yeah. It has it has mono, poly, unsaturated fat. It does have saturated fat, but the amazing thing is how much selenium it has. It has 2,739% of your daily requirement of selenium. It's really high. Selenium is actually, it is really high in selenium. Selenium is actually good for your heart. Okay, we can go into more. Yeah, selenium is actually it's important for your heart. It reduces your cholesterol level. Right. So what is the recommended? How much do you have to take? Because you do not want to get overdosed with selenium if you take too much Brazilian nuts. Right? You know what it actually does? Right? And let me go back. Right? It increases the activity of LDL receptors. Right? That's how it works. Right? Selenium does. And how much selenium? So how many nuts do you have to take? The effect lasts for a whole month. Can you imagine this? All you need is 4 nuts a month. You only need 4 nuts a month. Because if you take more than that, you get too much. People, 20 grams of Brazilian nuts. That's 4 nuts a month. This is amazing. Can you imagine? You just eat one Brazilian nut a week. It reduces your HDL and cholesterol. LDL increases your HDL, right? This is amazing. We should all be taking this.
Yes.
As a matter of fact, you will take this with lunch.
The storage of the nuts makes
Yeah,
Well,
because
you have to keep it in the refrigerator because it
is
has highly has fat.
Yeah.
It gets rancid if
It
you
gets
take it
rancid.
out. Yeah. So don't buy a lot.
Most nuts, you got it.
Yes.
Even walnuts,
Do it.
and they get rancid.
Yeah.
nutrient is not like a medicine or a hormone in the sense that it's a half-life.
Yeah. Right? Like selenium would not have a half-life, right? Yeah. But the fats would, because it could get rancid if it's not, right? Yeah. But this, I was amazed by this. Can you imagine just 4 nuts a month? And it's good for your cholesterol and your LDL. And what else? Oh, we got to go back to flax. Flaxseed. We always go back to flaxseed, right? It's amazing. It reduces your blood pressure, right? But it also reduces your cholesterol, right? It reduces your LDL. Within 6 weeks, it reduces everything, and it reduces your glucose, hemoglobin A1C, reduces your blood pressure, right? Flax. Yeah. And what is it in flax? It's the fiber. It's the fiber, right? There's a lot of fiber in flax, right? And what else? It's the lignin, right? The lignin in fiber, in flax. Lignin is actually it's actually the saturated fat in it, all right? The fat that is in flax, right? It's the alpha-linolenic acid, right? Alpha-linoleic acid, right? Because that alpha-linoleic acid in the body is turned into omega-3. This is very important for your heart, right? So if you eat this, it will actually block your saturated fats, because this replaces your saturated fat, and it will increase your LDL receptors, right? Because saturated fat blocks your LDL receptors, right? And how long does it take? You eat flax 2 tablespoons a day for 6 weeks. And what happens? In 6 weeks, it reduces your risk for dying of a heart attack by 73%. Can you imagine that? Flax. It reduces your risk for dying of a heart attack. Flax reduces your risk for a heart attack, right? 73%, taking it only for 2 weeks. 2 tablespoons a day. Ground. Because you can't ground, you ground it, right? So, here's the summary, right? I got to get to the summary here. Okay, this is the food that is not good, right? Right there. This is the food. This is the food that is not good, right? High in saturated fat and high in cholesterol, all right? And also has trans fats, right? So this is the mechanisms, right? Where can we block this? Right here, we block it by blocking bile from being entered, okay? Where else can we block it? We block it for the LDL receptors, right? We want the LDL receptors to be increased, right? And we also want to block right there, HMGCoA, right? Where statins work, right? A, B, C, right? So, I know this is going to be a little tough for you to remember, but I think I did cover them and where they actually work. Right. So, bergamot. Where does bergamot work? Bergamot actually works in B and C, right? B and C. Right. Okay, right? Bergamot is pretty amazing. Bergamot, tell you. Okay, what about psyllium husk? Where does psyllium husk work? A, right? Yeah, it blocks bile, right? It blocks bile. All right. What about artichokes? It has a lot of inulin, right? It blocks A, right? It blocks the absorption, right? What about berberine? B and C, all right? Berberine works at B and C. Berberine, you need 2 tablespoons a day. Phytosterols, you need 2 to 3 grams a day. Psyllium has, 10 grams? right? Bergamot, Brazilian nuts, all right?
I'm just gonna make a cookie out of all this.
Brazilian nuts, you just need 4 nuts a month. Can you imagine that? Where does Brazilian nuts work? B, actually B. Yeah. All right. And where does flax work? A and B, actually, right? A and B, because flax, oh, here we go. Okay, I gotta add, phytosterols. And flax, okay. Phytosterols work where? A, right? The block A. Right? And flax also increases your sensitivity because it competes with saturated fats, right? And then now it also has a lot of fiber, so it blocks at A.
Do you have to take omega with plant sterols?
Omega, the flax?
No, the plant sterols. So you have to take it with omega. Absorb it.
No, you take it with nuts.
Nuts.
Yeah. So the plant sterols does not get absorbed. It actually binds and flushes out the bile, right? Because it binds with bile, and it actually will get flushed out. And I'll go through that. So when you do this, when you take all of this, right? When you take those that bind at A, when you block it at A, now the bile, right, that was going to get reabsorbed gets flushed out because it binds with the plant sterol, binds with the flax, binds with the flaxseed, binds with the psyllium husk, binds with the artichoke, Now the bile gets flushed out. When bile gets flushed out, your body says, wait a minute, we gotta still make bile, and where does it take the bile from? The cholesterol from? Now it takes it from your storage, and it takes from your arteries and your belly, right? So all of this, everything that blocks A will cause your bile to get flushed out, right? And when bile is flushed out, cholesterol is flushed out, and cholesterol does not get absorbed. All of this is all good. But what else? What is the first thing you have to do?
Don't eat. Don't eat.
You gotta stop. Because the underlying cause of this building up here is what? Here, right? You can do all of this, but if you don't stop this, you do not stop the underlying problem, right? Right? You keep just adding.
Yeah, you have to stop the flow. Like one of my clients that you cannot have your foot on the accelerator and on the brake at the same time. It won't work.
Yes.
That's what they do. Because if you don't stop that, then you are accelerating while you have brake, and you're gonna have difficulty in stopping the vehicle.
The result becomes very true.
Yeah, what is like, you have a leaky faucet, right? And your roof is leaking too. Which one you stop first? The roof first, right? You can stop the roof from leaking first. You gotta stop the underlying cause first. You can take all these supplements, right? But the better thing to do is actually stop the underlying cause. Right? That's why, God says, I can prevent and heal your addiction disease. If you follow my statutes that I established in Eden. Eat the food that I made for you in Eden, because you are going to go to heaven. Right? And the food that you eat Adam and Eve ate in Eden is what you're going to eat in heaven. Right? And then you have to gradually lose your taste for the Egyptian food, because those are the things that will actually give you the Egyptian disease. And I will heal you with what? With science. With remain. Not only heal you, but I will prevent you from getting the Egyptian disease. So I hope you learn something from this. These are kind of the things that when I get invited to certain churches, these are the things that I kind of give. I try to make it a little compact here, but hopefully, we can be settled into the truth, intellectually and spiritually. So we understand the science behind why the Bible is actually true. Because science eventually really only confirms Bible truth. Amen.
So what do you think is
I'm sorry?
The gallbladder.
Yeah, the problem
that's for another study, but
no.
seems that we are right there.
Yeah, what happens? What's the reason for the gallbladder? But the gallbladder actually saves the bile, right? Saves the bile for when you eat fatty foods. Now, fatty foods includes nuts, the natural fruit fats, right? So that when you actually eat it, you will have a supply of it. So that will actually cause cholecystokinin to be expressed, right? So that now your gallbladder will squeeze, and we give a spurt out at the time when you actually need a big bolus of it. Right? So when you don't have your gallbladder anymore, that bile just trickles down a little at a time. And so when you eat fatty foods, it cannot get digested properly, and that's why a lot of people who have lost their gallbladder have persistent loose stools, right? Because they don't have that bolus of bile right at the time when they need it, when they're eating a fatty food, right? Because it only trickles all the time, and you don't get a bolus of it.
Could it be a possibility that if you remove your gallbladder, secondary, is there like a process to prevent the trickle of bile? And if there is or there isn't, could there be a possibility of anemia with the gallbladder removed?
No, not really.
So your liver is still going to...
It's gonna still make your bile.
At the same rate.
Yeah, but the problem is there's no reservoir from when you actually need it.
Do those make people have to take certain medications?
Yeah, they actually have to take a bile sequestrant, right? Yeah. They take bile sequestrant so they don't continue to get the
diarrhea.
Because they don't want that, they have to bind that bile, right? So that's,
It's a binder.
So you know what? I actually put 7 different foods.
There's not.
7 foods. There's actually more. But our Bible study is going to be a little too long. Yeah. 7 different foods and 7 different foods that you gotta eat and 7 different foods you gotta omega-3 from fish oil, right? So people say, okay, I gotta get my fish because it has omega-3. Right? But the problem is that we remember that the omega-3 that comes from the fish is actually eaten by the fish. That comes from algae. Right? Yeah. Yes. Algae is actually the source of the omega-3 for the fish. Right? So the thing about it is, algae, that if we want to just eat algae, it's only very little amount of omega-3 that we can get. If we want a lot more algae, a lot more omega-3, we get it from flax. Yeah. Flax seed, ground flax seed, and also walnuts. And no, that's another thing. That's one is what's the one that makes your there's flax and walnuts and it's no, algae has some, but it's actually quite good. No, it's not seaweed. The number one is flax. And then walnuts, and then no, it's actually something that you put in the pudding. No, I forgot the name of it. No. It's actually a fruit.
Fruit.
No, it's. I give this all the time, but sometimes it just slips out of my. I get a brain freeze right now. But number one is flax. Right? Number one for omega-3.
Chia seeds?
Chia.
Yeah.
The number three things that you can eat to make sure you have enough omega-3 is number one, flax. Number two is chia seeds. Number three is walnut. So you don't have to eat fish. The problem is that, omega-3 does improve your memory and your cognitive function. If you eat a little fish, your cognitive function goes up. But if you eat more, your cognitive function goes down. Because the omega-3 is now canceled out by the mercury and the PCBs that in fish. So that your cognitive function actually goes down after eating more fish. The problem is that the water still has the rainwater and everything, all the water. All our water is actually contaminated.
Rainwater?
Rainwater is contaminated, what we call PFAS. Have you heard of PFAS?
I see.
Yeah, it's in plastic, but it's actually called forever chemicals. Forever chemicals, it actually contaminates all water, even in the rainwater.
Because I put a bucket outside and let it rain in it.
PFAS, this is amazing how contaminated the water is. And PFAS, you cannot get rid of PFAS. It's actually called forever chemical. Yeah, it goes up into the air and it comes down in the rainwater.
You know what this reminds me of? That it's the only one you need. You may think of so many different ways that they can make the same one.
Well, all of this, hopefully, we can apply it. I'm telling you, I don't think I actually got the artichoke extract, but I got the psyllium husk, Phytosterols, Berberry, Flax, Bergamot. I got all of these.
Yeah.
I have all of these.
Artichoke.
I have the artichoke.
You mean you don't have a supplement here?
No, actually, I did not actually buy the artichoke extract.
Oh,
Yeah, that's what we're saying.
Right.
But you should.
Yeah, I did. No, but actually, I take all of it.
And the amla.
And
Amla.
another thing also is black soybean.
Yeah.
I don't add this because it's going to keep going and going and going. Yes, it has
You interchange them?
Black soybean?
No. You say all these technologies. Interchange.
Every day.
And Susan was just saying something.
You got to practice what you preach, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Susan was just saying about so that we can probably use cashew instead of I think
Brazil nuts, make sure you don't eat too much of it.
Too much.
One a day would be good.
You don't have
No,
one a week.
Or one a week. Okay, that'd be even better.
And then you 4 nuts
I
frank
can
in a
do
month.
that.
Oh, yeah. Just feel your cholesterol going down, 7 points. All right. Yeah. All right. With that, I'm going to stop this recording.